Capital One's Indian Mafia exposed. Massive H-1B kickback scheme displaces American workers. Inflated rates, fake resumes. Millions of dollars in kickbacks while American tech workers get shown the door. And then after that, I want to look at a couple of things about Indian culture that I think explain a lot about what's going on. Someone on Kiwi Farms actually found, I think, what really is the master key that explains so much of why we're seeing this, especially out of India. He writes, for the past couple of months I've been covering Indian-led hiring discrimination, visa fraud, and incompetence scandals at various American companies, including Capital One. I can now report that senior Indian managers at Capital One are accused of running a massive kickback racket that funnels millions through a hidden network of Indian-owned body shop firms in the Richmond, Virginia area. Funny, it's Virginia of all places, but it also makes sense. In short, American tech workers are pushed out of Capital One, replaced with underpaid H-1B, F-1, and H-4 visa holders with phony credentials, while managers pocket the difference between inflated billing rates and the contractors' low salaries. This is exactly the kind of issue that Project Firewall, the Department of Labor's initiative to investigate companies engaging in wage theft, visa fraud, and discrimination against Americans, should look into, implying they're not. And he's also got a compilation of his previous reporting on Capital One. The scheme is incredibly simple and profitable. Capital One managers steer contracts to a tight circle of preferred body shops, the list of which includes GC Services, NextSource, Apex, Pyramid, Artec Information, Astra, Diversant, Ascendian, Pride Technologies, Engine, and more. These firms then subcontract the actual staffing to another layer of obscure Indian-run LLCs clustered in the Richmond-Glen Allen area. Let's see, there's an update below. These have all been marked through. These sub-vendors are allegedly run by relatives, college buddies, or close associates of the Capital One directors who are signing the deals. Capital One directors Ranjit Kasanaboina, Srinivasan Sethi, Ganesh Kandula, Satish Kasiboyana, and others are implicated in this scandal. The theft works like so. A contractor billed to Capital One at a rate of, say, $120 to $160 per hour may only get paid $60 to $70 an hour. The remaining $50 to $90 is split, with part of it going to the primary body shop, part going to the sub-vendor, and part kicked back to Capital One managers in the form of cash or laundered payments. This process has accelerated the displacement of American workers from Capital One. Countless teams have seen Americans with decades of experience inexplicably laid off or reassigned only to see their positions filled weeks later by H-1Bs who routinely exaggerate or outright lie about their previous employment and skills. I wonder how many of you in chat have seen similar things happen in your place of work, either current or previously. Labor condition applications are allegedly doctored to show false job conditions, including false descriptions of roles and work sites, evading Department of Labor scrutiny while the real money is sent offshore or into personal accounts. A former Indian-American intern at Capital One shed further light, saying, quote, Capital One interns are given offers only if they went to the boot camp of one of the Indian hiring person's daughters. I got rejected because I didn't go to the boot camp. I am Indian, by the way. Later, I didn't get a full-time job because as a US citizen, I would be a direct hire, and the Indian consulting companies wouldn't get the kickbacks by hiring H-1Bs. So even the Indian Americans are getting the shaft here. My source claims Capital One's own leadership may also be complicit in burying complaints in order to protect this kickback network. I have written about the corrupt nature of Indian body shops. You got a link there. This Indian mafia scheme is a clear conspiracy to defraud Capital One and represents a catastrophic breach of trust, flagrant violations of business ethics, and potential federal labor law violations. This alleged kickback scheme is by far not the only Indian mafia-related scandal at Capital One. In October, Matt Forney reported on the case of Amir Zek, a Capital One engineer who accused Indian managers of retaliating against him as part of a broader pattern of Indian ethnic nepotism and racism against American employees. Damn, that is a lot. That's enough you could fill a Google Docie with. I'm going to post the link in chat. You may read this at your leisure. I don't know if I want to get into all... I don't know if I want to read all that. But big points here. Retaliation against him for taking parental leave. Retaliation for taking FMLA. That's the Family Medical Leave Act. Nepotism and discrimination. Playing games with the lives of recent hires. mobbing through sabotage and isolation, failing to provide in writing a detailed plan of action for the case, I decided to opt in to PIP, Performance Improvement Plan. I contributed to, it's a sort of open source vandalism that keeps growing. I contributed to the big thing. Indians try to push code into big repositories, usually containing zero code, but the addition of their name somewhere in a text file just to be able to say it. In an internal email, Zek accuses former boss Adam Day, director Shekhar Jha, and senior manager Pratyusha Gandra of retaliating against him for taking parental leave, for which he was legally entitled to under both Washington state and federal law. Following his return from leave in 2023, Zek claims his performance rating dropped from strong to inconsistent, based solely on a disputed communication issue, despite his performance continuing to be strong, alleging this was punishment for his absence and backed by video evidence of calibration discussions where he alleges Capital One leaders threw him under the bus. This pattern continued after Zek took FMLA leave in late 2024, triggered by stress-induced syncope that he attributes to Capital One's increasingly toxic workplace environment. Yeah, that's pretty familiar even for me. I had to take a leave of absence recently from previous employer because, yeah, it was just getting that toxic. Upon his return, Zek claims leadership failed to reintegrate him, putting him under a performance improvement plan. PIPs are always a trap, by the way, chat. Somebody higher up than you wants to put you on a performance improvement plan. They're just building a case to fire you. That's all it is. Putting him under a PIP on spurious grounds while adding an Indian engineer to erode his authority. Among other allegations, Zek claims his autonomy was reduced, he was handed breadcrumb assignments that he kept certification as he worked from home, and that he was gaslit in one-on-one interviews where minor issues were inflated into cardinal mistakes. Yeah, they're just building a case to get rid of him. He argues this was all by design in order for Capital One to meet talent distribution requirements, with his managers using him as an easy target while favoring others, mainly Indians. Zek alleges a conspiracy of Indian ethnic nepotism, accusing a clique of Indian leaders such as Jha, Gandra, and Madama Mamalakadala of mobbing him out of Capital One to replace him with another Indian. Quote, nepotism and discrimination on the basis of national background. It is pretty clear and evident from my case, as well as from a few other shared experiences, that a group of people of the same national background has organized and orchestrated mobbing in order to push me out of a leadership role in order to provide a secure seat for one of theirs. Numerous written and video evidence exists on my premises stored away from Capital One computer systems, same as they did to this person and many others. While this might not be visible to the associates at the lower levels below management, it is very clear and obvious at the leadership levels. It is sad and paradoxical that those who are in these seats barely speak fluent English and struggle with punctuation, yet a weak communication competency rating is reserved for someone like me who speaks 2 global languages fluently, pure nepotism, politics, and discrimination. As an example, he cites how he was ranked poorly on communication despite being fluently bilingual, while his Indian colleagues often cannot even speak understand. Zek states that other employees at Capital One are being treated similarly, with video and written evidence that he has collected, and attacks bait-and-switch recruitment, cutting-edge tech like Kubernetes, but deliver outdated Java 8 and XML work. Probably because that's all they know how to do, or that's all these that they work with know how to crank out. But yeah, claims poor communication, and yet speaks 2 languages fluently. Make it make sense. Finally, Zek indicts Capital One's PIP process as a sham. They all are, as it lacks measurable goals and is used to force out newcomers who are unwilling to work 80-hour weeks. This was corroborated by another former Capital One employee. Quote, a key point is that the problem does not originate with Indians, they just show up and play the game by their cultural rules. All the PIPs and distribution curves and career promotion issues are universal. The most pernicious thing he mentions is specifically hiring and staffing new employees for the purpose of sacrificing them next performance cycle and protecting your people, standard practice. We had a new lesbian senior leader one year, and every team went out and hired a woman with specific orders to reject all male candidates. That's illegal. But then again, large corporations like this don't give a shit what the law says. They never really allowed him to pass his first PIP. He played games and escaped it, and they just saved him to use for the next round. He had non-zero value as a spare body that allowed his new manager to make her bi-yearly sacrifice without losing one of her people. Another Capital One worker discusses how the company's performance reviews are designed to get white employees fired. Imagine my shock. Quote, basically, they have a lives the values metric on the review, but it's just a way to block white people. If you're not participating in a DEI group like Blacks in Tech, they say you're not living the values, but if you try to join such a group as a white guy, they just ghost you. So performance review rolls around, you get hit for not joining a group that you're functionally unable to join. That's the story in the card tech portfolio, at least. Zach also attacks systemic issues with the company, such as over-processization, in-shitification, that make Capital One more inefficient, and to the Department of Labor, USCIS, ICE, and other venues if his issues are not resolved. Note, after I originally published a story on Zach's allegations in October, I was contacted by another source of Capital One who corroborated his allegations. These stories from Capital One are common, and have resulted in its near-complete takeover by Indian managers and contractors. Another source alleges that over half the staffers at Capital One's Plano, Texas facility are Indians on H-1Bs, and that if you're an American working at Capital One's Plano facility, you are likely one of 2 or 3 actual Americans in a meeting with 15 Indians. Yeah, the company that I was working for previously, they were starting to do this. They were starting to build up an office in India and starting to staff our department with Indians. And it seemed like with each Zoom call, which I was forced to come into an office 3 days a week, spend all day on a computer attending Zoom meetings. And each Zoom meeting seemed like we got at least one more Indian added to the call. Capital One also operates Indian data labs, characterized as a massive building full of Indian slaves on H-1Bs. American staff was forced to take work calls at 7 a.m. or 8 p.m. in order to coordinate with offshore Indian contractors. The source claims he's witnessed Indians at the Plano facility washing themselves in sinks. That is disgusting. I mean, if you're gonna demand people work 80-hour work weeks, you could at least have the decency to install showers. But oh, I forgot that costs money. Better to just make it a humiliation ritual where people have to bathe themselves in the sinks, in the restrooms. Another source claims roughly 75% of the management in his organization are current or former H-1B visas, most of whom have less than 5 years of engineering experience. During the last cycle, there were 9 promotions to senior director, all of whom were current or former H-1Bs. There were also 15 promotions to director, 12 of whom were current or former H-1Bs, all Indian. Another former Capital One employee describes the company as having an epidemic of ass-kissing middle managers who do nothing but placate their bosses while doing no work. Indians. I don't think that's confined to Indians. That's a lot of people in the corporate world. I mean, chat, you've probably seen it in your work life. Ass-kissing middle managers claim they're so busy, and in fact they don't really have anything to do. Spend most of their waking hours just placating their bosses, bullshitting with them. The former employee worked as a financial analyst and had to contact Ajit, Apresh, or Adshush every other day to have GitHub database refreshes run. That is inefficient. You should just be able to do that sort of thing with a click of the mouse. The Indian employees would never respond to their messages and acted offended when they were asked to do their jobs. Well, of course. You're asking them to actually get up and do work. They don't want that. They just want a no-show job where they can just collect a paycheck. That's all a racket to them. I've received multiple allegations that Indians abuse stack ranking at Capital One to get their white and American colleagues fired, though another source offers a counterpoint. As the former employee states, we graduated our first financial rotation year and had a Zoom call during COVID with potential next managers. The 2 Indians gave completely incoherent presentations, and obviously no one selected them, so we were randomly assigned to them. They can't speak English coherently, and they're awful at their jobs. Shocking, I know. An individual who interviewed twice for a software developer position at Capital One's facility in Tyson, Virginia, contacted the author, believing he was passed over because he was not Indian. That's probably exactly why he was passed over. The individual provided a list of the interviews and interviewers he dealt with during the application process. There is no talented workforce in the world that can't be demoralized and disenfranchised by career middle managers. True and real. True and fucking real. Let's see. Technical interview full stack. Amanda Kash. Akshay Agarwala. Another technical interview full stack. Mihir Vora. Behavioral interview. Sandeep Paudel. Bharath Chekuri. Yeah, these are not Western-sounding names. Indian. Additionally, he notes that he had to pass a coding exam on CodeSignal to even qualify for the interview. Yet another ex-employee revealed that Capital One employs a large number of Indian contractors from body shops like Cognizant, which has been prosecuted by the Department of Labor for racist discrimination against employees. States that not only are Indian Capital One employees extremely racist towards whites, they are racist towards every non-Indian. Well, imagine my shock. A current employee at Capital One's Plano facility corroborates these allegations, stating that Indian employees are extraordinarily rude, unpleasant, and hostile to their non-Indian colleagues. I wonder how many of you in chat have had the displeasure of working for or with large amounts of Indians, if this has been your experience. I would love to hear it. You have engineers at SpaceX building a reusable Mars rocket being told what to do by people who don't know how to wire a plug. It's infuriating to hear them talk about it. Yes. If they had any good sense, they would just tell the rocket builders, or they would just shut up and let the rocket builders do their jobs. As he put it, it's almost like they all know they want to replace Americans, but since it's not work appropriate to discuss, they just interact with Americans as little as possible to save face. That's exactly what they're doing. They know they can't just out and out say it, because that would be against the law. So they're just going through the motions. And they're also treating the Americans like shit, as much as they can get away with. Also probably racist against other Indians from the wrong caste. Yes, that is also another good point. They engage in that same sort of behavior if you're from the wrong caste. And if you have different castes of Indians in a company, then yes, there is inevitably going to be conflict. Another source reaches out to reveal how Capital One promotes unqualified minorities, including Indians, over white men. Quote, after managers had discussions about who was going to get promoted, they would look at the approved promotion list. And if there weren't enough women or minorities on the list, they would pull people from the reject list and promote them anyway. White men were at a definitive disadvantage in this process, as they never got pulled from the list. It was much harder for them to move up, and they ended up having to report to people who were lower performers. But there's absolutely no reverse racism going on against white men in the corporate world. No. That's just an extreme right-wing myth and talking point. They continue, and you are absolutely right in that Indians would only hire Indians. I've been hearing about that for years. Entire groups would be Indian only, but there would be no white-only groups even in a white majority area. No white spaces. No white spaces allowed. The end result is a toxic workplace environment for non-Indian employees. Another former employee of Capital One described it as the worst place I have ever worked due to its gossipy, DEI poison culture. He describes Capital One as having an extremely gynocentric, HR-fixated culture. Quote, everyone is always whispering about someone else. If you don't, they're whispering about you. White men are treated like second-class citizens, and women and minorities cannot be criticized or questioned ever. He also confirms PIP abuse is rampant at the company. Capital One is also facing multiple allegations of visa fraud. An ex-employee reports that there are a large number of Indian women employed at Capital One who deliberately try to have anchor babies to make their stays permanent. So they turn into whores, basically. Another staffer reports direct evidence of visa fraud in the form of a recently fired engineer who was caught supplementing his income by recommending people who were unqualified and doing their coding tests for them. He was also using his company phone to send pictures that should never appear on a corporate network. He was looking at porn. He was looking at and sending pornography on a corporate network, and probably doing so quite brazenly because he knew he could get away with it. And for a long time he probably did, until the crime stacked up so much that people couldn't look the other way anymore. That's the thing. All of this stuff gets tolerated to a point to where it risks bringing the heat down on the organization as a whole, and then the people in charge, they can't look the other way anymore. Any other time, they'll look the other way. Another source states that Capital One gets regular visits from the Indian embassy to assist H-1Bs in maintaining their visas. In a team meeting last week, the Indians were discussing having to go get their paperwork updated when it was revealed by one of them that the Indian embassy visits the Capital One HQ at least once a quarter to help employees keep their paperwork up to date. There are so many Indian employees working at the corporate office, the embassy comes over multiple times a year. Multiple times a year, embassy staff over at Capital One HQ. Corporate Bobs and Vagine, yes. Indian H-1Bs at Capital One are consistently incompetent, imagine that, masked by the fact that American team members pick up the slack. Imagine that. The pattern the whistleblower has observed is this. H-1Bs have short stints as junior engineers before being quickly promoted to senior management. He gives a few examples. A co-worker does not do their job well, so others pick up the slack filling in the gaps. She does well in her evals by doing things outside of her job, such as scheduling social events, networking events, etc. In other words, high school social butterfly bullshit. Looking at my org chart, you can pick any manager between me and my senior vice president. There's an 80% chance they're Indian, and if they are Indian, there's a greater than 70% chance they came over on an H-1B. Some are now GC holders now. Almost all of them worked for less than 5 years as an engineer, then moved into engineering manager, senior engineering manager, director, senior director, VP roles. Joe, thank you for the 50 kicks. Thank you so much. None of them know how to use the tools we use, so we often end up with spreadsheets containing project plans and roadmaps. In fact, one director got promoted to director after getting an award for creating a planning spreadsheet for the only successful project he contributed to as an engineer. And probably his only contribution was the spreadsheet. When we had a senior manager leave, he was pipped and opted out. He was also an H-1B that came from Microsoft. He was replaced with another former H-1B. He's a naturalized citizen who's been here for 27 years, seems competent so far. He sums it up by saying that he has engineers who report to him that are more experienced than the director and the senior director he reports to. Another source writes that Capital One has been firing or laying off American workers with more than a decade of experience in favor of H-1Bs who are incapable of doing their jobs. He states that the previous Indian director of his department knew absolutely nothing about what his team actually did and had no desire to learn it. But of course not. That requires work. They don't want to do any of that. Half of his team was fired via PIPs, not replaced within our team, but used to justify new hires in other teams the Indian director manages. It's all just a big game to them, isn't it? The alleged kickback scheme among Indian managers at Capital One fits a clear pattern of Indian discrimination against American employees. Capital One has fostered a hostile work environment that violates multiple federal labor laws, including anti-discrimination laws. The Department of Labor must investigate these claims. Right, so we've got some updates from yesterday, from 11/25, 25th of November. I've been contacted by a representative from Global Sumi Technologies who has denied the allegations. The representative also published the DM they sent me. A representative for Artifiction LLC and Intellect Technologies have also contacted me denying the allegations. They provided an example of their post on job boards. Representative from Arca Technologies contacted the author denying the allegations. Representative from Rising Tide Solutions LLC has also contacted the author to deny the allegations. But yes, that's the absolute state of what's going on at Capital One. Honestly, it really makes you wonder if everything is so broken over there. I wonder what would happen if people just stopped paying their credit cards, the Capital One credit cards, en masse. It would just absolutely break them, I'm sure. But I have to wonder if anyone would even notice. I mean, if nobody's doing anything over there, if nobody's really working, I wonder if people just stop paying the Capital One credit cards, if anyone would even notice. Though, honestly, you should just do the right thing, and if you have a Capital One credit card, close it. I don't know if they still have bank accounts. They used to have their own bank with checking and savings accounts. But if they still do, you should probably close that as well. Because, I mean, who would want to do business with something like this? This is not in the best interest of Americans or the West. This is abuse. This is abuse of a system. And it's been weaponized for one particular ethnic group to extract wealth, send it back to their home country, and in a way attack the native population and just use them in humiliation rituals. There's the link in chat for everyone. So you may be wondering, aside from the obvious, they want money, it's like, why is it that we find so many scams coming from India? Why is it that that country in particular is home to so many scam artists, people just taking money from Americans, from British, from Westerners? Well, someone at Kiwi Farms, I think, discovered the master key, a sort of thing that a theory of everything. It's known as Izzat, or the cultural honor system of the Indian subcontinent. And this explains every single trope about Indian behavior. It's this gigantic invisible clout-chasing game that involves screwing over everyone as much as possible. It was posted on Kiwi Farms by Gluttonous Manslob. He said, didn't see this term mentioned in the thread, so I wanted to share this all with you. It's about Izzat. Some posts have mentioned saving face, which is Izzat, but I wanted to elaborate on it. Izzat has no direct translation into English. We only have terms that can broach the same concepts such as honor, or reputation, or face. But Izzat is so much more than that. It is a zero-sum game of collective honor shared by whole groups of people, all of whom take it very, very seriously. A system like this is not just foreign to Enlightenment values. In fact, it's antithetical to every sensible form of governance on the planet. It'll destroy any system that assumes good faith. Saw this awesome read. It is. Izzat conflicts are not about who is right or who is wrong. It is about who wins and who loses. That means it's a zero-sum game where just about any action is justified, including murder, to restore the lost Izzat. Izzat is a limited social currency, and the easiest way to get it is to take it from someone else. Winning is righteous in Izzat. Losing is unrighteous. This means if someone plays the game of Izzat well enough, they can get away with just about anything, be it murder, rape, scamming, cheating, stealing. The only morality in Izzat is the protection of your group's collective ego. The only appropriate response when your Izzat is attacked is the complete destruction of whoever insulted it. Let's say two people get into an argument. They might escalate, but chances are it won't be that bad. Oh, sorry, I broke your garden gnome or something. But with two Indians in an argument, the stakes are always deadly, thanks to Izzat. Neither of them can back down, nor can they admit fault. Admitting fault is seen as deliberately humiliating yourself. Not only that, but because Izzat is shared, you are shaming everyone who shares your Izzat. So admitting fault, or taking responsibility for the problem, is a form of social suicide. This means even if the dispute was over something completely fucking stupid or trivial, like a broken garden gnome, it could spiral into a decades-long honor feud. Izzat is also the reason why police are reluctant to get involved in disputes, because Izzat is a zero-sum game. All participants are involved in the game. If a policeman sides with one family over another in an Izzat dispute, this means he's deliberately taking the side of that family and dishonoring the other. This marks him for retribution by the offending party, and without parties being able to be impartial, centralized authority cannot effectively function. This is absolute madness. I can't believe this is even a concept in any part of the world. This is savagery. Let's say someone in India complains about a broken water pipe. Instead of the problem being addressed, like, in functioning societies, the official responsible for the water pipe denies it as a problem and counterattacks him instead because daring to question his efficacy and his role was challenging his Izzat. So the official destroys the person who brought the problem up, and the water pipe never gets fixed. I mean, that would explain why India is such a shithole. Izzat is also the reason why Indian managers are so infamous for hiring more Indians. It is because, from the manager's perspective, this is key here, chat, he's using his position to gain an invisible social currency. Merit and actual qualifications come second to that idea. If he hired a Westerner, he would not gain Izzat. He might even lose it by doing so. He has a very strong cultural incentive not to be impartial. Meanwhile, if he can strong-arm dozens of Indians into a company, he is gaining huge quantities of Izzat and conspirators who owe an absolute debt to him. It's not even about doing the right thing, it's about being in someone else's debt. This is just so twisted. It's not uncommon to see Indians gloat about their success in the West. And yes, Izzat is very much a system that enables short-term success. But the fundamental reality is the prosperity that these Indians find so attractive in the first place would not exist if the West practiced something similar to Izzat. How ironic. Our systems can only exist on the assumption of good faith, and not a majority of people exploiting them for destructive short-term gain. On top of that, if an Indian causes the systems and companies he comes into contact with to collapse, which he will, then he can just go back to India with his plunder. He has no stakes in the long-term prosperity, functionality, or stability of these systems. The stakes are completely asymmetrical in the Indians' favor. They all have to go back, chat. They all have to go back. Mass deportations. Now. Detain, deport all of them. Send them back, all their families too. They all have to go back. You all know that that infamous video of the Indians scamming a food bank. Once again, winning is righteous, losing is not. By employing clever means, or jugaad, he successfully extracted more resources for himself and his family. From the perspective of jugaad, a rule is not something to respect, but merely an obstacle to the Indians' own gain. This is psychopathic and sociopathic thinking. Since he cheated the system and wasn't caught, he is seen as righteous and a dignified man in the Izzat framework. I read a story in India about a man offering to pay another man to use a public toilet instead of defecating openly. The latter left and came back with several friends and beat the former to death. The problem was not that he was defecating openly. That is a problem, though. But that he was criticized for doing so. And with Izzat, it is not eye for an eye. Izzat is often eye for the whole head. Disproportionately and brutally annihilating your enemies is the correct move to make because you take back your lost Izzat and then some. This kind of vindictiveness would be rightly seen as horrifying and disgusting in most of the world. And it is. Objectively speaking, it is. There was a green text from 4chan. I don't have it, so bear with me. Anon knew an Indian. This Indian would make outlandish claims. He could bench press 500 kilograms. He was a billionaire. He did arms deals with the American government. Anon said he did not believe the Indian. The Indian reacted with righteous indignation. The situation escalated to the point where the Indian was emailing Anon death threats. Anon responded by forwarding the emails to the police. The Indian killed himself. Anon was left baffled at the whole situation and no idea what the fuck just happened. Not even Indians want to share a country with Indians. No, they really don't. They know what's up. Unless it's our country, yes. Unless it's a Western country, then they're happy to come over and pillage and plunder and extract wealth and resources from all of us and send it back in the form of remittances to their families in India. Because, that brings them more Izzat. So without Izzat, this looks like an utterly insane and pointless sequence of events. But with Izzat, the Indian's actions suddenly make sense. He was boasting to increase his Izzat. And when Anon simply stated his disbelief, it was seen as a vicious attack on his Izzat. The Indian escalated the situation to restore the lost Izzat. And when the police got involved, that dispute had become public, so the Indian's shame had increased to unbearable levels. He committed suicide in order to save his remaining Izzat. Anon had no idea what Izzat was, or if he did, he didn't mention it. Yet the Indian's actions perfectly align with this framework. This is what makes me believe the green text was genuine. The Western idea of merit is competence in a role. Merit in Izzat is determined by what links you will go to achieve a goal, with competence merely being one path. It often becomes a secondary path, as printing a degree that says you're qualified to be a jet pilot is just as good as being able to actually fly a jet, in the eyes of Izzat. In other words, Izzat selects for appearance over authentic merit or morality. In other words, what looks good publicly is what brings you great face. Now, a counter-argument an Indian might make is Izzat is a dated word, or we don't use that word. I like to compare it with the word vendetta. Vendetta in Italian has a very specific meaning, a familiar blood feud where revenge must be taken to restore honor, etc. This word would not exist if it did not reflect a specific facet of Italian life. Isat is no different. Hell, I've had to write several paragraphs just to explain what the hell Isat is. Isat is not an archaic term either. It is well and truly alive in the modern Indian lexicon. So, the next time you bring this up, chat, and some Indian national says, oh, Isat is a dated word, or we don't use that word, we don't do that sort of thing anymore, they are lying to you. They lie as easily as they breathe. If Isat were regularly discussed openly, this would be considered one of the greatest possible insults in the Isat framework. It's almost like rule number 1 of Fight Club, don't talk about Fight Club. Isat is why Indians do mass reports, death threats, false flags, and various other underhanded tactics when a Westerner exposes something they don't want people to see, such as a poop-throwing festival. If I knew something like that existed in the West, I would say, wow, that's disgusting, we should stop this. But in India, the problem is not the point. The point is the problem being exposed and the perceived insult to Isat from exposing the problem. In other words, the water pipe never gets fixed. The poop-throwing festival never gets cancelled. The one saving grace is Isat performs awfully in the long term. This is something to keep in mind, chat. Once Indians displace you, they'll go back to playing this insane game amongst themselves. It's what happened to companies that got hit by Isat. This is also why there aren't any homegrown Indian companies that have the same influence as Microsoft or Google. Whenever they start getting ahead, their companies implode from infighting, nobody doing their jobs, everybody trying to cheat each other, and nobody addressing critical issues. I think we're seeing that with Capital One now. So Capital One is on borrowed time. Systems that delegate authority and work on good faith eventually win out over zero-sum honor feuding. Isat cannot maintain complex systems because its players are only concerned with short-term gain. With the West, the issue is that it often fails to live up to its own ideals. It's not a perfect system, but we can course-correct and address problems pragmatically. With Isat, Indians live up to those ideals very, very often. When you see the dysfunctionality of India, remember, that's a feature of Isat, not a bug. Jugaad as a term also warrants more explanation, but the post is long enough as it is. And that is absolutely brilliant. Really good stuff. This is from the account xJosh. He even linked over to the post on the farms. Let's see. Azahara responding to this is why they all chimp out when you call one out for being retarded. Insane law drop, much appreciated. Don't forget the Juggernaut law too. See, somebody linked a Zero Hedge article. India, it's worse than you think. Anybody from anywhere in the Iberian Peninsula would have an uncanny feeling reading this because you're describing gypsies. They've been here for 600 years, still operate under this exact system which they brought with them from India. Unassimilable. Yeah, this is good. Anyway, let me drop a link to that in the chat for everybody. Go give that a like. Why everyone scams everyone in India, explained. Let's pause the music and watch the video here.
Redeem! Do not redeem the card! No!
Do not redeem! Why do you redeem?
India has become world famous for making all manner of scamming a national art form. Thus, in this video, we examine the zero-sum honor code, where winning justifies anything and getting caught is the only real crime, even if it means torching the West's good faith systems along the way. And it starts now.
I see that Felix has taken to using David Attenborough in AI form.
So then, whether we like it or not, stereotypes persist because they reflect real, observable, average differences between groups in traits and behaviors, which humans detect through evolved pattern recognition.
Most stereotypes are true, chat. Most stereotypes are true. And I think we're all just sick of people pretending that they're not. Stereotypes exist for a reason, and most of them are true. And that's all it is, as he said. It's just pattern recognition.
Individual variation is large and overlap is substantial, making stereotypes poor predictors for any one person. But robust data from psychology and behavioral genetics show that denying average differences entirely means ignoring empirical evidence. On a cultural level, Russians are known for their prowess in chess, Japanese for their refined manners, and the French for culinary excellence.
The culinary excellence is debatable these days, and I would say that the Japanese have probably got the French beat.
Others, of course, are less flattering. Americans are loud. Irish can drink like fish. And Indians, well, India has turned elaborate fraud into a national art form.
Almost
And now,
sport.
with mass, unrelenting immigration that is demographically transforming the post-Western world, and that's a good thing, it pays to understand what is arriving.
I think he's being facetious. It's not a good thing.
One thing arriving in industrial quantities, however, are scams. The latest example making the rounds in 2025 is the wheelchair scam on India to US flights. Viral videos show long lines of perfectly able-bodied Indians rolling through airports in wheelchairs to jump queues, skip security, and hog lounges meant for the actual disabled.
Has anyone in chat seen this lately? Like firsthand? I'd be interested to hear what you thought of it if you saw it at an airport. Though the videos, those are wild, man.
Air India suggests up to 30% of passengers request wheelchairs, with most ditching them post-boarding like discarded props. And these seemingly simple scams,
all at the expense of people who are actually physically disabled. Because these people view it as a sport to try and game the system.
Though, are very much overshadowed by much larger schemes to acquire ill-gotten loot.
I would love for someone to capture this on video, calling out that whole lot there, and just watching as they all completely and totally chimp out. Because as we've just read, that puts their izzat at risk. That puts their honor at risk. I imagine those people would get out of those wheelchairs real quick and start throwing things, probably even throwing punches. It would get violent really quick, but it would show the world just the absolute savagery of these people and what they're capable of. All because they want to jump a fucking queue at the airport. This is beyond dysfunctional. This is also low IQ, sociopathic, and psychopathic behavior. It really is. Any psychologist worth their salt would look at this and say, yes, this is the behavior of psychopaths. Someone tell me I'm wrong.
In 2018, celebrity jeweler Nirav Modi fled India after orchestrating the country's largest banking fraud. $1.7 billion extracted over 6 years from a single Punjab National Bank branch using a mountain of forged letters of undertaking. When the scheme collapsed, Modi was living luxuriously in London while the bank's share price cratered and India's taxpayers were left holding the bag.
So we're going to Switzerland.
Then there's Rotamac Pens. Its owner allegedly diverted $1.6 billion in bank loans meant for importing pen parts and expanding factories. Instead, the money funded luxury villas, private jets, and a lavish lifestyle.
It's like he bought himself a nice BMW there. Lovely little country cottage. Pretty posh existence on the backs of others.
By the time authorities raided his luxurious Kanpur mansion, and that was in 2018, Rotomac had become nothing more than a shell company that existed only on paper, and the banks were left chasing ghost ink. Rewind to the 1990s and you hit the most grandiloquent of them all, the Bihar fodder scam. Politicians, bureaucrats, and suppliers, all in cahoots, fabricated invoices for non-existent livestock, thousands of cows, buffaloes, even elephants that never existed, pocketing nearly $110 million in government funds earmarked for animal feed and medicine. The scam...
They could have... It sounds so complicated. And credit where credit's due, it sounds like a fairly creative scam. But imagine spending that much energy on a scam when you could have been fucking building something. I mean, they really could have built themselves a hell of a business with that much ingenuity, that much cleverness, that much time on their hands. They could have actually built something. But no, they took the easy way out. They decided they were just going to make shit up and scam people out of money.
Ran for almost 2 decades, involving the state's chief minister even, and exposed how entire treasuries could be looted with nothing more than a fake receipt and forged signatures.
It really goes to show you how fragile a lot of these systems that we built up really are. From infrastructure to banking and financialization to even the legal system. There's ways to hack and scam these systems everywhere. All of it exists on trust and good faith. And when that trust and good faith is eroded or called into question, that's when it all starts to collapse. It all comes undone. And somehow we think these high trust, good faith systems can still be maintained importing these kinds of people. Make it make sense.
And these aren't isolated crimes. They are what's called generational heirlooms, passed down like family recipes. As Palash Krishna Maharota wrote in the Daily O, my schoolboy crush scam was the Bihar fodder scam. For others, it was the Nariv Modi. And today's teenagers will grow up swooning over whatever fresh multi-billion-dollar heist dominates tomorrow's headlines. And why is this?
Why cheating comes naturally to Indians. I mean, what a fucking headline. And really, what a damning indictment of a people. Of a people. Of a country, of a culture. I'm not going to call it a civilization because that would be an insult to the term of civilization.
Well, because, as Maharota explains, India is a zero-sum jungle. From the cigarette vendor quietly pocketing your 5...
For us Indians, cheating has become a way of life. Headline, The Times of India. These are major outlets, Chad. These are major English-speaking outlets. And they just openly fucking admit it. It's like, yeah, cheating's a way of life for us. Big fucking deal. What the fuck are you going to do about it? Bet you won't do shit.
Rupees to the private hospital billing you for blood tests you never took. Everyone is simultaneously predator and prey. If you don't exploit, Maharota warns, you will automatically become the exploited. Scams, he continues, barely register as scandals in India. We would riot in the streets over a fixed India-Pakistan cricket match long before we marched over a bank robbery that wipes out billions. But beneath the hustle lies
sad.
Something older.
But then again, in-group, out-group preference. Of course they would riot against a fixed match against the Pakistanis because, well, India hates Pakistan. Always have, really.
Something fiercer is that. And a very interesting
here we
thread
go,
has been
Chan.
making the rounds on X via Kiwi Farms that helps understand this concept more fully. Now, Izzat has no direct English equivalent, perhaps honor, reputation, or face, but they all fall short. It is a collective glory, a zero-sum currency shared by families, villages, and castes. Your gain is my loss, and losing brings unrighteous shame that stains everyone in your bloodline. In the world of Izzat, right and wrong do not exist, only winners and losers, and victory justifies anything. For example, a man pays another man to stop defecating in public. Well, the second man returns with his friends and beats the first man to an inch of his life. Not for the act itself, but for the public criticism. An eye is never enough. Izzat demands the whole head. And
This... I can't tell if this is AI generated. But you know what, if someone were to show this to me and say, yeah, this is India, mate, I would probably believe them. I would probably believe them.
disputes can turn lethal and can last decades. And scams are Izzat on a grand scale. Nirav Modi did not merely steal $1.7 billion. He won. Rules are obstacles to bypass with jugad, or clever improvisation.
Oh, here's the here's the Indian bloke who raided a food bank. Indian data scientist in Canada under fire for raiding food banks. Indian data scientist on a student visa in Canada faced online backlash over his video in which he revealed how he exploited food banks meant for students facing financial difficulties. People pointed out he had a 98,000 Canadian dollar salary and did not need food bank support. And I believe his response is just like, I don't care, fuck you. Or, how dare you criticize me? I'm sure he had a lot of backup from his fellow countrymen.
Many viral videos, especially in Canada, show men fleecing Western food banks for resale. And for Western...
Yeah, we the Westerners are viewed as the real bad guys because we're the ones stupid enough to fall for the scam.
It's theft. But in Izzat, it is a triumph. He outsmarted the system and fed his family. Winning is righteous. Getting caught is the only sin.
And look at that. Canadian Food Bank excludes first-year international students. A Vancouver-based food bank has decided to stop providing free food to first-year international students. So one fucking moron ruined it for everyone. But he doesn't care. He got his Izzat. He got his upcomies, and he got his free food. He doesn't care. And if anything, you're the villain for daring to criticize him for it. You're the bad one because you're the one stupid enough to fall for the scam. This is who we're dealing with, chat. And this is why I say they all have to go back. We can't share a country. We can't share countries, or even our part of the world, with people like this. They are vampires who will absolutely bleed us dry. They will bleed us dry and then grind up what's left of us and make some use of that. This is who we're dealing with.
Fed his family. Winning is righteous. Getting caught is the only sin. Even in the diaspora, Izzat travels like an uninvited guest, turning...
2 men convicted in massive Ontario truck driver training scam. Govinder Singh, 69, Gurpreet Singh, 37, have been convicted and sentenced in Ontario for defrauding dozens of aspiring commercial truck drivers, most of them new immigrants. Those people don't need to be... I mean, first of all, those people don't need to be driving commercial vehicles. Those jobs need to go to native-born Canadians. This is bad enough with states like California in the US. Just as awful, apparently, in Canada.
Tragedies into communal crusades. Take 2 cases that are interrelated in North America. In Canada, 2 Indian men were convicted in Ontario for running a fraudulent truck driving school that offered substandard training in Punjabi, not in English nor French. And this was given to South
I'm not an expert in the regulations or laws of Canada, but I'm fairly certain they mirror those in the US, where you have to speak English. Speak, read, and write and understand English in order to drive a lorry. And we've got issues with so-called commercial lorry drivers on American roads and apparently also on Canadian roads that they don't understand English. And for the Canadians, they also don't understand French. That's dangerous. That is a safety issue. And as we've already seen in places like Florida, for example, there are people, there are truck drivers who have no business driving a lorry, have no business even having a CDL, because they can't read, write, or understand English, were practically given those licenses, and it's ended up costing innocent lives.
Asian migrants while bypassing mandatory certification and charging $4,000 to $5,000 per student. In the US, a 28-year-old Punjabi truck driver who illegally entered the country caused a fatal crash by making an unauthorized U-turn, killing 3 members of an American family.
Failed his CDL exam 10 times in 2 months. I think after about 2 or 3 times, it's really just needs to be, no, you're not getting your CDL, forget it.
And what followed was not just a legal fallout, it was an Izzat storm. Within days, petitions exploded on change.org. Advocate for leniency in Harjinder Singh's sentencing.
Yes, focus on the living, they said. Fuck these people who were killed, apparently. Let's focus on the living. Like the lorry driver who survived this horrific crash, which frankly, that's more than he deserved.
And this amassed over 2.8 million signatures from the Indian diaspora, Punjabi communities, and sympathetic strangers worldwide.
Unfucking believable.
And this might seem insane for the average American, but when you peel back the layers, it's pure Izzat at work. This is not abstract justice. It is collective honor on the line. Harjinder's downfall shames not only him, but his village, his Punjabi kin, the entire Sikh trucking network in America. Admitting full fault is unthinkable. It would be social suicide, a stain spreading to every relative, every temple supporter. And instead, the community mobilizes like a feud. Mass signing campaigns, social media blitzes, and appeals from Sikh organizations. It is zero-sum redemption. Rally to win leniency. Restore the group's dignity, even if that means downplaying the shattered victim's family. For Izzat...
Yeah, fuck the victims, fuck their families. All these people care about is their own honor and saving their own face, saving their own worthless hides. After fatal crash, Sikh truck drivers in the US fear backlash. As well they should. As well they should. Because frankly, somebody like this, I see them and I start to wonder, did they obtain their license legitimately? Because it seems to me like a lot of these people did not. And that's a safety issue that puts a lot of people's lives in danger. So, sorry, in the risk of public safety, you're all going to have to lose some Izzat. You're just going to have to take it on the chin. You're going to have to take the piss on this one. Though considering that this lot hosts poop festivals in their home countries, they probably get off on that sort of thing.
Players' exposure to the problem, and this, in this case being the fatal accident, is the real insult. Fix the system is secondary. Protecting honor is paramount, especially on the global stage.
Yeah. This is why we can't share. We can't share countries, we can't share a civilization with these people. It's just not possible.
This is why Indian managers in the West hire more Indians. Merit is secondary. Hiring your own brings Izzat and a network of people who owe you lifelong loyalty. It's why diaspora Indians sometimes gloat about conquering Western systems built on good faith, as the stakes are asymmetrical.
Only the superior will rule the world. Now the world knows that Indians are superior. Yeah, you keep huffing that copium, mate. Keep huffing that copium. There's nothing superior about you. There's nothing superior about any of this. And as we've seen, you people can't hold the victory. You can't secure the victory. It's all going to fall apart on you, and you're going to be left with nothing in the end. Because the ungodly inevitably destroy themselves.
They have no skin in the long-term health of the system that they exploit. People will say, oh, well, Izat, it's an old word. Nobody uses it anymore.
Bullshit.
Well, that's like saying Italians stopped having vendettas because the word feels dated. And that's why criticism of anything Indian, open defecation, festivals, food preparation, talking about Izat, in fact, scam after scam, well, it triggers mass reporting, death threats, and coordinated outrage. The only consolation is that Izat is a terrible long-term strategy. Companies taken over for Izat points implode from infighting.
Why people living in India will forever be known as conmen. I mean, if the shoe fits.
Corner cutting and refusal to address real problems. That's why there are no Indian Microsofts or Googles, because complex systems cannot survive zero-sum honor feuds. Good faith systems, even imperfect ones, eventually outlast the hustlers. So what do you think? Leave me your thoughts in the comment section below. Also, as always, remember to check to see that you're still subscribed, as YouTube has unsubscribed tens of thousands of people without their knowledge or consent. Also, if you'd like to help the channel, ways of doing so are in the description. It'd be very much appreciated. And with that, I will see you again in the next video. Bye for now.
I'm still subscribed. That's good. All right. There's the link in the chat for everyone.